Hi, everyone. Welcome to Reporters Roundtable. I am Rafe Needleman in San Francisco, and today on the show, it's drones. Under the Christmas tree, in the deadly skies over Afghanistan, soon perhaps replacing traffic helicopters, unmanned aerial drones are showing up everywhere. A combination of technological advancement and necessity has led to the creation of military-grade unmanned flying vehicles, almost affordable toy-grade quadcopters, and a growing commercial hobbyist industry in between to build new, increasingly cheap, and increasingly smart robotic flying vehicles. Of course, we're all familiar with the stories of remote-controlled drone airplanes that perform reconnaissance and increasingly carry lethal weapons for our armed forces. These drones are primarily remote-controlled, but many have a measure of smarts that enables them to fly parts of their missions with complete autonomy. How smart can flying robots get? Just ask your neighbor, the geek. He or she may be one of the tens of thousands of community members of DIY drones working on improving the state-of-the-art of the autonomous aerial drone, using open-source hardware like the Arduino microcontroller and the quadcopter architecture that's becoming ubiquitous. What are the privacy and legal implications of a world in which governments, businesses, and private citizens can buy or build smart and perhaps silent reconnaissance vehicles? Welcome to the future. It's being built today. Okay, so for this great topic, which I'm really excited to do today, we have two great guests that I bet you have heard of. First, and they're both here in the studio with us. First, Chris Anderson, who is the editor-in-chief of Wired magazine. Perhaps you've seen this issue. Here Come the Drones. He is also the founder of DIY Drones, the community site of people who are building these things, and of 3D Robotics, the manufacturing arm of that community. Chris, thanks for coming in.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Also joining us, Daniel Suarez, who is the author of this book, Kill Decision, a thriller, which I highly recommend. This is a book about Chris's drones gone bad.
Oh, not specifically, but yes, drones gone bad.
Drones Gone Evil. It is a really fun read. Daniel is also the author of Demon and Freedom, two other great techno thrillers that I highly recommend. Before that, he was a systems analyst, so he knows of which he speaks. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we've got just a ton of things to talk about. Now, I want to start with this. About a year ago, right after we took out bin Laden, we did a show with Wired Danger Room writer Spencer Ackerman on the role of the unmanned vehicle in that particular campaign and in the military overall. That was May of last. Was it last year? Yeah, it was last year. What has changed in the world of the unmanned and autonomous vehicle since then? And I use those words separately because I know you have a point of view on that.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is like technology of any sort, which is to say that it starts with big companies in the military. The internet started that way. Mainframes started that way. Computers in general. And you pay attention to that, and you think that's the only way it can happen. And then slowly and quietly in the undergrowth, the hobbyists and the home brewers and the hackers start fiddling with it, and they start burbling up from the grassroots. And that's been what's happening over the last year. That the grassroots drones movement has now exceeded the military drone world in terms of just numbers of drones out there.
Now, in terms of numbers of physical drones there are, or diversity, or in what way is it exceeding the military?
So a little bit of definitions. A drone, as you mentioned before, is an aircraft capable of autonomy. Sometimes it's flown remotely, but it can fly by itself, takeoff, landing, GPS waypoints, cameras, all that kind of stuff. It can be just anything as simple as a radio-controlled model airplane, the kind you'd see in your park, flown by children. And then somebody adds this. This is an autopilot. It's just a little box that has computers, sensors, GPS, lots and lots of software, and then suddenly gives the plane a brain, or the copter a brain. That means that all those toy airplanes out there are just one box away from becoming drones. Now, these cost $200. As opposed to the military ones, which can cost tens or hundreds or millions of dollars. And so as a result, what you're seeing out there is a lot of basically what formerly were radio-controlled toys being turned into drones at a very low cost, which is why there's so many more of them than the military ones.
Daniel, is it this particular movement that gave rise to the central tenet of your book of these autonomous, swarming, armed black flying drones?
It's the ubiquity of it. It's you know, as is mentioned in this Wired article, this whole industry that has made accelerometers and the specific chips that empower this so cheap has brought the price point down to the point where many different entrants have come into the industry and just created this sort of Cambrian explosion of drone species. And now even very, very small groups can use this in conflict. That's what I thought was interesting. It's almost a miniaturization of war to the extent that hobbyists are taking these larger drones and turning them into toys that they can use or for civil use, cameras and so forth. It's also occurring to people in conflict that they can take these larger drones and shrink them down. And we were just talking about this missile that's only 2 feet long that they're designing to put on smaller drones now. And the idea is having a swarm of much smaller drones is more survivable. It makes war more personal, less collateral damage, all of that stuff. So you carefully target the person you're looking for with a small drone. So it's this Venn diagram. There's a slight overlap between the hobbyist drone and the war drone. And it's not going to be the same people using them, but the technology is going to be similar in many ways.
You know, what's interesting to me about this is that it was literally just slightly more than a year ago that we were talking about drones, and what we were discussing then were big flying, primarily fixed wing machines, and that we were seeing them getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The Phantom Ray, I believe, is a several million, probably $100 million delta wing aircraft that flies at 40,000 feet completely. I don't know if it's completely autonomously, but that's a scary aircraft. And now we seem to have gone in the space of 15 months completely the other direction.
Well, it is an ecosystem.
What happened?
It's an ecosystem. You're going to have different species doing different things. You're going to have the global hawks that are going to sit up there at 60,000 feet, stay persistent, eye in the sky, looking down, and then acting perhaps on information will be smaller drones or a whole constellation of smaller drones doing various things. I mean, 85% of the drones are, I think, less than 24 pounds in the military's fleet. You know, they're still they only represent 4% of the cost, 85% of the drones. But then you have the much bigger ones that do, connection to satellites, very high detailed imagery from high up, that type of thing. So it's different. They have different purposes.
So if you go out right now to the San Francisco Bay and watch people surfing, odds are that increasingly you'll see something that looks like this flying overhead with a camera on board. This is a drone, and it's a drone being used to film extreme sports and probably autonomously. Might be that someone's having one of these follow it, follow the person as they're doing stunts, just kind of positioning himself above and behind. That's the kind of thing that's cheap and possible and fun. It's a complete non-military application, and it's not what people thought of as drones, but increasingly will as these become much more common.
I find that almost hard to believe, but just because what I know about this, which is my Parrot AR drone, this is, you don't even call this a drone because it's not fully autonomous. However, it is a very intelligent airframe. You control it with an iPhone, and no matter which way it's pointing, the direction that you tilt your phone is the direction it goes, which is cool. Now, granted, that's just a simple algorithm, but I happen to think that's cool, knowing how these vehicles work. But this thing, in a 2-mile-an-hour wind, becomes almost unflyable. Are you saying that device can handle winds on the Bay of San Francisco?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the difference between these two. I mean, we do small ones as well, but those are really designed for indoor use. This is a quadcopter, but they come in 6 and 8 as well. These have quite powerful brushless motors, big lithium polymer batteries. This can handle, I would say 15 knots is about optimal. I mean, I've seen it go in 20, but 15 is about right. In other words, this is designed for outdoor use as opposed to a Parrot AR drone, which is really designed for indoor use.
I see. And, wow. Okay, so we talked briefly about using these things as kind of flying spotter bots, some measure of autonomy. Maybe it's following a beacon or on a sailboard or something. Or I guess it could be with those things are so brightly colored, it could probably just lock onto the sail.
You could do. I mean, typically what happens is you carry a little GPS device. Again, it's a little box that looks like this. It has a GPS device and a little radio, and then it just transmits your position to the drone. The drone positions itself behind you.
Now, Daniel, in your book, you talk about swarms of drones being used for assassination and taking out ships with laser cutters. Chris, your hobbyist clan out there, your 25,000 strong communities, members of DIY drones, what are they doing with these other than just doing it because they can, because it's cool?
Yeah, this is very much like the homebrew computing club of the 70s. I mean, if you'd asked Jobs and Wozniak, what's a computer for, they'd say, so you can program it. And that was a sufficient answer for a lot of people for a long time. And then people thought of word processing and spreadsheets and video games and ultimately email and the internet and all that. We're a little bit further along than the because you can program it stage, but by and large, the application, and most people are doing it for just coolness. It's a fun education platform. Aerial robotics, taking robotics from the 2D world to the 3D world and all that. Increasingly, it's being used as a camera platform, not just for hobbyists, but also for mapping areas like Google Maps for agriculture to look at croplands through different filters that can tell you how the water or fertilizer is going. Hollywood's using it a lot. So right now, if you're watching a car commercial and there is a camera following, a camera in the air, that used to always be a manned aircraft, a helicopter typically. Increasingly, that's an unmanned aircraft that's doing the same thing, cheaper, less dangerous. You can get it up in the air anytime you want. Scientific sensing is another good application. That whole zone that's sort of 400 feet. It's below the clouds. So satellites are great, but they're far away and they're above the clouds. Airplanes can get below the clouds, but they're expensive and hard to get in the air. And the notion of anytime, anywhere access to the sky is what a drone can offer for anybody, from farmers to scientists, whoever you want.
Anytime, anywhere access to the sky. That's interestingly put. Do we have, I assume we wouldn't know because, over a couple thousand feet, these things are pretty much inaudible. Are there drones flying over our cities right now doing Google Maps or watching our traffic?
I wouldn't think by official entities they'd be concerned about permitting and things like that.
There are none. I can pretty much guarantee you there are none flying over San Francisco right now for commercial purposes.
Yeah.
I think there is one flying over San Francisco right now for Amit. I think I happen to know what one of my team members is flying right now over San Francisco. You wouldn't know that. They're flying below 400 feet, so it's not like orbiting over this line of sight. But the way the FAA, the national regulations work is that there's a amateur category where basically anything goes as long as it's below 400 feet within visual line of sight, so you can avoid, if there's a manned aircraft that comes by, you can take control and get it out of the way, away from built-up areas, people, airports, things like that. If you're a commercial entity, it's almost impossible. There's a long permitting process that you can't get through. And so ironically, my 9-year-old can fly drones, but the San Francisco Police Department can't.
I have to think about whether that's good or not. Whether I'm relieved or worried. Daniel, as somebody who looks on the dark side of what these platforms can do, does that make you feel good or bad?
Well, actually, that part's indifferent, and I have to say that I look at I of necessity look at the dark side in this. I actually am very excited about drones myself because they're going to happen anyway. I think soon the FAA is going to rule on this around 2015. We were talking about. And then I think you'll see thousands of permits approved for various uses of drones. And I just hope that what's put in place is some sort of system by which if you see a drone, you can go to a Google map type thing and find out what it is. Oh, it's the Department of Water and Power. They're inspecting lines, something like that. So there's some visibility, some transparency there. But I look at the dark side principally because a techno thriller that's happy and ends on a happier note is not very exciting. So I always look at the really dark stuff.
And plus, it'd be unbelievable.
Yes, and that too.
It's easier to believe that these things are being used for these purposes. Now, I got an email from I'm not going to read his name. My name is so-and-so, and I'm a drone operator for and builder for Nuvero Flight Systems. You know them? Just so you're aware, drones for commercial use are illegal in most countries. Here in Canada, we require permits for every flight and must provide detailed flight plans and info about every job. Most companies that attempt to turn drones into a business, especially in the USA where national security is such a scary topic, either go out of business or get shut down within the first year.
For now, probably. That's true.
I just don't see flight plans being... I mean, these things are ad hoc aerial vehicles. I don't see flight
plans...
Not
a commercial one, though.
Yeah, go on.
If you're going to be inspecting power lines, let's say over a 100-mile-long stretch, and again, the potential to interfere with manned aircraft to go haywire, there's going to be some sort of transponder on it that will tell it if it goes off.
Couldn't you build a database of no-fly zones into the little GPS unit?
You can. The way it works is that there are absolutely no-fly zones, and we get emails about and texts about those, so we know about that. If you're commercial, you have to file for what's called a certificate of authorization from the FAA, and you need to say where you're going to be and what zone you're going to be in when, and they basically clear the airspace. And the reason they do that is because The number one rule of the national airspace is sense and avoid, the ability to see other aircraft and avoid them. So even if you can't count on air traffic control to keep you apart. You need to be able to have eyes in the eyes in the cockpit. These things don't have eyes in the cockpit. And so because they can't avoid a manned aircraft, you have to keep manned aircraft away from them. So as amateurs, we do that by staying 400 feet. The manned aircrafts basically stop at 1,000 feet. There's a 600-foot buffer, and then there's 400 feet, which is where kites and balloons and toys go. And so we do it with this vertical segmentation of the airspace. But commercial ones typically want to go beyond that. And with that, you need to notify the FAA and have them clear the airspace. Someday we'll have sense and avoid technology on board, whether it's going to be transponders, as you say, but that would require all manned aircraft to have the same transponders, and there's some political opposition, to say nothing of economic opposition to that, or whether they're going to have just onboard sensors that can achieve what eyes can achieve, which is spotting any potential manned aircraft out there and getting out of the way.
So what's the future look like? I mean, these platforms are so inexpensive. The cost of failure, if it doesn't involve flying into some other aircraft's manned aircraft's windshield or engine, is very low. I mean, one of the things falls out of the sky, it could cause damage, but not nearly as much damage as a helicopter. Okay. Are we going to 10 years from now look up in the sky and see delivery drones zipping back and forth like the pneumatic tubes of the 30s and 40s?
I think delivery drones, which is what everybody always goes to. They go straight to pizza. I don't know why. That's actually one of the hardest AI problems there is. I mean, think about it. You have to navigate a urban environment. Telephone lines, trees, buildings, street signs, pigeons, people, all that kind of stuff. You need to, GPS is multipath bouncing off wall. It's a terrible environment. And then you have to get to the right place, and you have to find a place to land, and it has to be safe. And that's might happen in my lifetime, maybe. A much more likely one would be like in Africa delivering medicine. Right. There you have a case where the roads are very poor, and the thing you're delivering is actually quite light. So that's a perfect application for it. But this, the taco copter.
There's a video on in your Wired story about this.
Yeah, I mean, we did it for fun. Yeah. We delivered a pizza, but we did it manually. And I would say that. You're not going to see delivery vehicles overhead anytime soon. I do think you'll see drones overhead frequently in the next 10 years, simply for the kind of things that Google Map aircraft do right now, which is you want traffic helicopters, updated view of the the land, the houses, the urban environment. Right now, the Google plane comes by once a year. Wouldn't it be nice if it was up there all the time? If you had a live view of the
Wouldn't
city.
it be nice if there was a Google platform with cameras looking down on my house all the time? I leave that question as an exercise for the reader.
Would you like your
That's
Google
kinda how
Maps?
I heard
Would you
it,
like
too.
your Google Maps to be real time or 6 months old?
I'm not sure.
Depends on what
I
I'm
see your
doing.
point, but I'm still not sure.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Well,
Well,
that's society's question to answer.
See, this way, you only have to keep your backyard tidy once a year. But if
I'm
there-
telling you guys, just as a little side note, the business I'm going into, if this publishing thing doesn't work out for me, is urban camouflage nets for backyards. I shouldn't have said that because I know
You did. You just gave it away.
This is going to be a big business. Am I right?
like that netting they have on MASH, that type of thing.
Totally,
Yeah.
except it's going to be of a clean backyard with an empty swimming pool.
Well,
That's
you know,
great.
it's interesting that the privacy rules are actually not enshrined, specifically on a federal level. It's based on reasonable expectation. What kind of privacy can you reasonably expect in your backyard? And once upon a time, when our houses were far apart, it was infinite. Then we got closer together, and there were fences, and there were senses. And then we had satellites overhead, but they only had certain resolution. Then we had planes overhead; they had a certain resolution. You could probably nude sunbathe in your backyard and assume that no one's going to be able to recognize you. But how much longer is that true as the cameras get closer and closer to Earth?
That's a fascinating topic. In Germany, for example, when the Google Street View camera goes by and takes a picture of your house, here, I think that the culture says, it's my house. Mm-hmm. It's facing a public street. Mm-hmm. If somebody takes a picture of it, there's very little I can do. Germany is like, no, I think it's Germany. I can have that blurred. So there are different cultural expectations. Where is this going to go? Are we going to walk out of a door and immediately expect that any sense of privacy of what we're doing, what we're wearing, what we look like is completely blown away, including our backyard?
We're already there.
We're there.
Yeah, it's just whether we realize it.
On my walk over here, I walked 2 blocks. I probably passed 5 cameras.
I was Hang on, let me check.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they are.
Yeah, no, that's done. Between camera phones and public surveillance, once you're outside of your house, it's fair game.
Yeah, purchase records, everything, geolocation.
Yeah. Now, but the backyard is still sacred space in some sense, and the question is, how is that reasonable expectation changing?
Um, Now, I want to talk about the technology a little bit. We've probably all seen those videos of drones at various research universities doing amazing things, flipping over, perching on walls, flying through thrown hula hoops, cooperating with each other to build things. There's a great one of a bunch of drones playing the James Bond theme on a bunch of oversized instruments. How, of course, that's research being done by smart people in universities, and eventually they're going to leave the university and productize some of that stuff. But where are we right now? What is the state of the art for the autonomous or remotely piloted quadcopter?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a really important distinction between those videos which you see, which are all done in a motion capture room. So those, what it's called a Vicon room. Basically, what happens is cameras around here. It's like motion capture where you have little dots, little sort of like ping pong balls on the device itself, and cameras looking around it. And they're watching and ascertain the position of the copter because the room figures out where the copter is. The copter doesn't know anything, and then the room controls the copter. So it's basically a big, it's a room making the decisions. Now you take it outside, and they don't know anything anymore. So there's a half dozen of these Vicon rooms around the world, and they cost like $500,000. So that's unobtainium. You can't do that. Once you go outside, you're dealing with GPS, much lower resolution. So maybe a few meters rather than a few centimeters. You're looking at wind. You're looking at sort of difficult radio environments. It's a much tougher problem. So the state of the art right now in the outside world is that for $200, this is ArduPilot, which is the ones that our community, the DIY drones community, created, sold by 3D Robotics, my company. So this costs $200, and it's got GPS and all those other sensors inside. And this will do full autonomy, takeoff, waypoints. You point and click on a map, and you tell it where to go, and you press go, and off it does its thing. Probably plus or minus about a meter, which is about as good as GPS gets. And it'll work almost all the time, but things can go wrong. It's still kind of a bleeding edge technology. Swarming is the next, where you get multiple ones communicating with each other. And these things all have these special radios on board, which are designed to communicate with the base station, ground station, telemetry, but can also communicate with each other. So, the algorithms to let them work collaboratively are going to come out, and they're going to get smaller and lighter and cheaper and all that. The indoor stuff is still kind of a research exercise. It's a good way to test algorithms. We haven't found any particularly useful applications for it indoors yet, but someday perhaps we will.
Now, Daniel, I don't want to give spoilers to your book, but I'll leave that to you if you want to. But knowing full well of the limitations of the current technology, you developed, I don't know how much you invented or extracted from public materials, a technology for autonomous drones to reinforce each other's behavior. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? It's a really interesting idea.
Well, I based it, of course, on social insects, Hymenoptera weaver ants. And it relates to a concept called stigmergy, which means modifying the environment, basically, to communicate between members, agents in a system, so that they can iteratively interact with that and navigate and read messages from each other. So it's sort of like a swarm can upvote something that they discover in importance, so that more of the agents converge on that point, all of them upvoting as they go. And that's how it sort of manifests itself as intelligent reaction. I would say I extrapolated. I took some poetic license, but really it's sort of just an over-the-horizon thing. It's not completely beyond the realm of possibility. But that's, what I wanted to do is I wanted to look a little further ahead to say, if things keep going in this direction and one were devoid of ethics, one could do this. And again, designing a system that's not perfect, that has lots of casualties, that makes lots of mistakes, but the fat part of that bell curve gets it right. And although the extremes on either side might get it wrong, whatever goal the swarm has can be achieved. And it depends on how important that goal is. So if that goal is attacking an important political target, how much is it worth somebody for a political reason, to send $100,000 drones to get rid of somebody. I mean, that's not a very big investment, especially if attribution is difficult. That was one of the key things here. Autonomous drones could give you anonymous warfare, the idea that it would be very difficult to determine who's attacking you, particularly in a world that has a profusion of drones everywhere, many of them off the shelf. And again, I'm not trying to be negative. This is going to happen. We're going to have drones everywhere, and they're going to have manifold civilian uses, and it's going to be great. But I always look at what groups that are in conflict, how they might use cheap technology. And again, we were talking about this earlier. This is sort of bringing the price point for an Air Force down to sort of the Boy Scout troop level. Of course, I don't picture Boy Scouts doing this. But let's say narco
I'm going
traffickers.
to get the badge.
Look at narco traffickers.
Yeah.
I think of this. Let's say they're moving, I don't know what the cost is for a kilo of cocaine, but the point is, let's say it's $30,000. If you're sending a swarm of drones over the border with a half kilo each, and you lose half of them, you still made a lot of money, and you didn't endanger anybody on your team. And in other words, things like that could be driving an illicit market in drones, and it would make financial sense. And then there's warring parties and all these things. So I had to look at this dark territory because, to me, conflict, human conflict in particular, is always an early adopter. They're always going to take whatever technology comes down the line that gives them some advantage and use it. And I thought that was fascinating, how you could use these, again, extrapolate a little in the technology, try to use them cooperatively. And it's amazing when you look at it as a swarm. If you have modern weapons, it's still very difficult to knock down a swarm.
Yeah, now, Chris, as the editor of Wired, this is a topic, the shrinkification of technology and the distribution of technology from, say, a $100 million platform to $10,000 platforms. I don't know if I did
Or
that
$1,000
right.
platforms.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, but is that, you've seen that happen not just in drones, but in every other technology. Is that what is happening here? Are we moving away from the big, vulnerable aircraft carriers in the sky to
Absolutely.
a swarm of PT boats?
Yeah. The secret is this.
Go ahead. Go on.
The smartphone revolution.
Yeah.
And you may not think about this, but inside your phone, you have all the sensors necessary to fly a plane. It's got gyros and accelerometers and magnetometers and GPS and wireless and cameras and processing and memory and all that kind of stuff. And thanks to the economies of scale of Apple and Google and others, what used to be super expensive technology to make an autopilot is now pennies. So absolutely, we now by sort of coattailing on the smartphone industry, these are the same things, just in different form factors. And as a result, this, which would have cost $100,000 10 years ago, now is going to be $150, and ultimately they'll be disposable. And disposable drones. I mean, we're going from commercial drones and military drones to personal drones, and now disposable drones. That's when you get into the kind of statistical approaches that Daniel's talking about.
Daniel, one of the things you talk about in your book is a government reaction to the obvious proliferation of potentially dangerous vehicles under the control of people who are uncontrollable, and an outlawing, a ban on this technology.
Well, I had to show that sort of knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
Do
you think we're in danger of that, though?
Well, it's one of the reasons I put it in there.
Yeah.
To kind of, I don't want to say mock it, but it would be an absurdly ineffective thing to do, because this is going to happen. As a matter of fact, I was reading recently, the LA Times mentioned that there is a 1987 agreement that the U.S. government signed to limit, that limits our exportation of drone technology. I think I have the name of it. It's the Missile Technology Control Regime.
Mm-hmm.
And drone manufacturers in the United States were complaining that that's the reason they can't sell drone technology overseas. But what they're doing is pointing to the fact that all of this stuff is happening in the civilian space, that we shouldn't be restricted from doing this. And that sort of shows that restricting it, if we don't embrace and understand and meaningfully regulate drones, they're going to happen everywhere else. And then they're going to come in from the outside. So again, there's really no stopping this wave. I think we have to be reasonable about it. I wanted to show it or dramatize it such that that's the first thing they would do, is just, well, we'll just retract this license to use this for hobby use, and that'll protect us. And no, it won't protect us.
The cool thing is, I didn't get a license to get this thing. I just bought it.
Yeah,
I mean, actually, they sent it to me, but you just buy
what
them.
would you ban? I mean, again, you can buy the chips in a Radio Shack.
Exactly.
The software was developed on the internet and it's open source. It's given away for free. The airframes are toys.
So, to get away from the doom and gloom here
Sure.
and under the stuff that we can all enjoy and participate in, you have an inexpensive autopilot, autonomous pilot there. What else is happening in the approachable world of these products? I mean, you've got batteries, motors, sensors. Where's the state of the art right now in this?
Yeah, so there's sort of three breakthroughs that allows something like this. The first is, I mean, these are this is called Arducopter, and it's an Arduino based. This is ArduPilot, which is the autopilot, and this is the copter version of it. There's planes and others. These are in unstable platforms. It's impossible for a human being to fly them. Basically, the way they work is that you just speed up or slow down the various props. Two go in one direction, two go in the other direction, and it goes 200 times a second. That can only be done by a computer. So we had to invent three things. First of all, the ability to put sensors and computers on a really small platform. These required MEM sensors. These are microelectronic mechanical devices which are found in your phones, and started with things like airbag sensors. The second is these motors are called brushless motors, and these were kind of at first invented for DVD drives. And the third is that high-efficiency batteries. I didn't bring one, but lithium polymer batteries, which again are the kind of things you have in phones and laptops. So what's interesting is that all three of them came out of the computer industry. These came out of DVD drives. The lithium polymer batteries came out of laptops and phones, and the sensors again came out of phones, etc. So 10 years ago, not possible.
Is that why we didn't see quadcopters until now? Because they're an inherently unstable platform.
Exactly.
I had a regular helicopter with a big rotor and a tail rotor. That's human controllable. Barely, but yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They need They need to be flown by computer or flown by wire.
Okay.
Which is, in other words, the human being controls the autopilot. The autopilot controls the aircraft.
Oh, fascinating. So when it comes to autonomy, which is one of the things that you're working on, or your group, your community members are working on, how autonomous are these? I mean, can I so say, drone, make me a sandwich? Or I mean, what can we do?
Yeah, exactly. So what you do is there's a piece of software that runs on your laptop. It's called a mission planner, and you call it up, and it opens up a Google map, and you zero in on whatever area you want. Is you just click and you say, go here, go there, go there. At each waypoint, you can say loiter, look at a certain point of interest, change your altitude, whatever. It's just you just click and pick from menu items, and you click your way into a mission, and then you upload the mission to this, which includes an automatic takeoff and landing, and then you just press go, and that is full autonomy. You look at the laptop and watch maybe the camera's view in real time, but the aircraft flies itself.
A year or so ago, I think we heard about a group of protesters in a country, I forget which it was, forgive me, who were using drone technology to monitor an approaching dangerous force of military or police.
I think it's been in a number of places, but I think Poland was the first Warsaw, possibly.
So is this technology changing I mean, I guess it's an obvious question, but how is this technology changing the equation of government versus people when that happens?
Well, look at what happens when we've seen a lot of videos of this. People trying to film the police, which is a legal activity, and then getting arrested. It's going to be much harder if you're filming them from a drone, and it's probably safer. And again, there's that attribution thing, like, well, somebody's filming us. And then I know that there's been some talk about getting police drones. I don't know what they would do with them other than film protesters, either for legal reasons. But I think it's only a matter of time until they start to put together some sort of countermeasure to knock down protesters' drones. It's going to get pretty weird.
Will that work if these things are autonomous?
Oh yeah, no. There was a PETA group was protesting a bird hunt. I think it was a pigeon shoot or something, and set out drones to film the hunters. And so the hunters simply took their shotguns and pointed it and shot them down. Yeah, it turned out they were sitting ducks, if you will. So there's something called drone journalism, which is the notion that journalists, in their function is sort of being an oversight of the authorities, would use drones to do this. I think it's a good idea. I want to be really, really cautious about the use of it. Putting a flying lawnmower, with spinning blades over the head of a crowd, operated possibly by amateurs, is a really, really bad idea, and it's illegal in most countries. And I think that people who are responsible about promoting drone journalism are very, very quickly recognize that particular example is a poor one. Among other things, you really should keep multicopters away from people. An airplane, a foam airplane, would have been a much better choice, even though that is also technically illegal in most countries. So it's easy to get too ahead of ourselves and sort of start to think that it's going to be, Occupy Wall Street with their Air Force versus the police with their Air Force and the drone battling over the skies. I think that would be kind of dangerous.
We've talked about quads and I guess octocopters or whatever they
hexacopters, octocopters.
Of course, we're all familiar with flying fixed-wing, autonomous or unmanned vehicles. Are there other form factors that are emergent here?
We focus on 4 in our communities. There's the multicopters, which range from traditional helicopters with 1 blade all the way up to 8 or more blades. Aircraft, as you mentioned, and typically relatively small ones. They tend to be to foam, light, really wouldn't actually hurt a plane if they hit it, or wouldn't do much damage. We have rovers, which are autonomous ground vehicles, which are also supported. You put with the box in an RC car, and there you have a rover. And then we have blimps, and blimps are a lovely platform for teaching autonomy inside the home with children in a completely safe space. There's also boats and submarines, although we haven't gone as much in that direction.
And in the flying, in the Wired story, you talk about bug bots a little bit, briefly.
Yeah, those are mostly research efforts. Right now, I should have brought it in, but right now the smallest sort of quadcopters are about this big. Once you get smaller, you're dealing with kind of basically power management issues. It's really hard to get enough power. Insects use chemistry. They get food in the environment, and they convert it into glucose and to power their very efficient muscles. We're nowhere near as efficient as that with electric motors and batteries. And so you end up with as you get smaller, the aerodynamics get harder, and the power issues get harder, and your weight thrust ratio gets all wrong. So we're not there yet. I suspect that something more biologically inspired will ultimately succeed.
Daniel, were there other form factors that you got left on the cutting room floor? I mean, there's this great scene. There's this great scene in your book where you have blimp bots.
Yes. Yes. Swarming.
Yeah. You can buy those. I've seen them in startup offices around.
I have great fun with mine. It upsets my cat though. It's noisier than you think it is.
It upsets your cat. That sounds like a good reason to get one to me. But anyway, go ahead.
No, but there's many different form factors. Also, as far as the submarines, I know that there are some universities using them for doing environmental monitoring, basically to set them on some sort of pattern to measure things in the deep ocean, which is it's a great use for it.
Submarines are a lovely use for autonomy. So what robots do is jobs that are dull, dirty, and dangerous, right? So dull is actually the most interesting ones. Just go out and watch something forever. Right, and then the great thing about the submarines is that these gliders, they just kind of use the currents and the temperature gradients in the ocean to be out there for months at a time. The only challenge for submarines is that you can't get GPS underwater, so they really don't know where they are at any particular point in time. And because they're out there for so long, they can't carry a lot of energy with them, so they tend to kind of go with the currents. So they're kind of think of it as a kind of a sensor that's out there somewhere. You can every now and then it surfaces and you know where it is, etc. But it's not highly controllable, as opposed to these others, which are pinpoint accuracy. They go exactly where you want them to.
Well, let's wrap up. Chris, people watching the show probably are probably thinking, I have to try this. What's the best way to get started with this technology?
So I actually, although everyone's loves copters because they're really cool, they're actually a little hard to fly for beginners. So I actually recommend that people start with a foam airplane. So go to DIYdrones.com, which is the community that does this, and you'll see lots of getting started guides, etc. But I would recommend that someone start with a foam RC airplane. They cost about $60. There's one that's called a Bixler that we quite like. And just learn to fly it. And it's super easy, and you'll crash a bunch of times, but that's okay. They bounce. Then once you're comfortable with that, then this is the cheapest autopilot out there. It's called RGPilot. Get one of these and just put it in there. And at that point, you've got a drone. Now you can experiment with mission planning. You can put a camera on board. You can start to do fun stuff.
Okay, cool. And that's DIYdrones.com.
DIYdrones.com.
Daniel, I recognize full well that this is a thriller
Yes.
and that the conflict is for the sake of the story, but you do spend a fair amount of time thinking about this in order to come up
Yes,
with these
I do.
books. What are you concerned about or excited about in the realm of autonomous vehicles?
I am both excited and concerned. I would say, as far as my concern, I in particular focus on, again, the kill decision, that is giving drones, autonomous drones, the authority and the power to pull the trigger on a human target. That crossing that line is very worrisome.
We have not gone there yet, have we?
We have not gone there yet officially. I know there's a couple of systems out there now. I think I've talked to you about them before. They're sniper systems, but that feature's turned off right now. It's in the DMZ between North and South Korea, and then on the Gaza Strip. Those are sniper stations. Those are not flying drones. But there is no technical impediment to this. So I'm glad that people are reluctant to make this choice, although I do know that with 50 other nations developing drones, somebody's liable to do this. And I'm concerned that we would cross that line very hastily, because I think there is a dangerous concentrating effect of giving that authority to machines, because then suddenly you don't need other people's buy-in to have a war. You just need some resources, some money, and you can conduct a very large-scale secret war rather invisibly. That concerns me. In the context of a democracy, that concerns me. So it's really one of the concerns I had in writing this book. Now, as far as the hope, I mean, I think drones can do so much from a civilian point of view, from environmental monitoring, search and rescue. I mean, many tons of uses, and we'll find more, all these people working on this. So they're going to happen. I just wanted to do a cautionary tale that was thrilling, again, that sort of exploded.
Daniel Suarez is the author of Kill Decision, which is orderable now.
It's orderable
Is it
now.
out now?
Comes out July 19th.
Really, really fun book. Chris Anderson is the editor-in-chief of Wired and the founder of DIY Drones, where you can get your own and make your own. Thank you guys for coming in. It's been a great
My
show.
pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, for watching Reporters Roundtable. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Thank you, Stephen, for producing. We'll see you all later.